Good afternoon, Jeff, and thank you so much for coming on Zoom with me. I'm pretty excited about this. This is Jeff T. Bowles with me today, and I became acquainted with Jeff from his first book on vitamin D, using larger doses of vitamin D to treat any number of maladies that we really don't associate with vitamin D. He's sort of like a archaeologist or in a medical library kind of
Paleontologist.
sense,
Oh, a
paleontologist
paleontologist in a dinosaur pit.
in a dinosaur pit. You used to have to do this in the medical school library, but now we've reached new heights of ease. And Jeff's latest book is a conversation with AI. And he's digging into something. His usual fashion is to create a hypothesis and then find what supports it and what denies it. And Jeff, please tell me the name of your new book. I'm not have it in front of me, and it's a long title.
Well, I don't remember the name myself. Let me see if I can find a copy.
Oh, sorry, I can get it.
I always do long titles because I don't have any marketing. I sell the books on Amazon, and you got to have a long title because that's your only chance to hook somebody. It's your only ad.
I've got it.
Here's the.
No, I don't.
Here's the book.
Okay.
I've got it. ALS Breakthrough. Oh, and AI made this title, by the way.
Okay.
ALS Breakthrough: How Arguing with AI Revealed a Hidden Cause and Patient Zero's Miracle Results Point to Hope for Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and Beyond, by Jeff T. Bowles, Grok 3, and Perplexity AI. I put them on as co-authors.
Oh, that's good. Those are my favorites too. I go to both of those many times myself. So I started reading your book. You let me know you had a new book, and I am just stunned by the thread that you pulled on about magnesium being the undercurrent of a lot of this. What twigged you to the magnesium thing? And please maybe talk about your patient zero while you're explaining all this.
Oh, well, now in the front of the book, let's give the viewers a puzzle to work on if you want. And will explain how I figured out this. Oh, no, never mind. You already blew the secret. You told them it was magnesium.
Oh, sorry.
So if they read the book, you spoiled the puzzle for all the people that read the book, but that's okay. I put in the most important clues that I came across, and I'm probably the only one in the world who had come across some of these clues because I wrote my books on taking high dose vitamin D3, like crazy amounts that the FDA would never approve. It's not really crazy. It's just they're trying to keep us all sick with taking too little D3. They get all crazy if someone wants to give their patients 4,000 units a day. They make them put a black box warning label on it, and has to go through 10 committees to get approval. And it turns out 4,000 units of vitamin D3 is about the same as sunbathing for 6 minutes.
Yeah.
So
Let's put that in perspective. That's shocking.
Right. Yeah. So they've been trying to scare us away from D3. It keeps us all sick. It gives us all autoimmune diseases when we're D3 deficient. Dr. Coimbra in Brazil has been curing every autoimmune disease known to man with high doses of D3, like 50,000 a day, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And my book was talking about high dose D3. So I started hearing back from people all over the world, like more than 1,000 that they call, they email me like, oh, I took high dose D3 for this and this happened. Like one guy's blind eye, he was permanently blind from a sinus infection that affected his optic nerve. And doctor said it was permanent. He'd had it for 2 years. He started taking 60,000 a day. And then with his wife, she was doing it for endometriosis. And he woke up one morning, he said, like 5 weeks into it, and he said, "You're not going to believe it. I'm looking at you through my blind eye." And he had regained 40% of his vision just at that point. He's probably gone to a full recovery. I haven't talked to him since. But that was one clue. I said, oh, vitamin D3 repairs damaged nerves. And yeah, most doctors think nerve damage, a lot of it's permanent.
Right.
But no, your body will repair nerves if you have enough D3.
They'd rather drink the pain. They'd rather drink the pain of all that.
Yeah, that's true. So that was one big clue. Another huge clue was I wrote another book on ALS about 10 years ago. Some lady with ALS emailed me, said, oh, would high dose D3 help my ALS? I looked into it and it said, some studies said, no, it helps. Others says it's not good. I said, I don't know, but I bragged in that book I could find a cure for any disease in 30 minutes to 30 days just by reading PubMed abstracts. Because my idea was that all the research has been done and it's all in the PubMed database, but there's no one playing with the puzzle pieces. And so I'd been doing that for a long time. And it's just, I like jigsaw puzzles. This is just kind of a more complicated jigsaw puzzle. So I said, fine, I'll try and find a cure for ALS for you within 30 days. And
you have to prove your hypothesis.
Right. So I did it the way I always do. I just typed in ALS in PubMed, and there were 14,000 abstracts. So I started at abstract number 1. Then I read abstract number 2, abstract number 3. Abstract is just a summary of the large study. So I don't want to spend too much time on the whole study unless it's like really significant. Mm-hmm. So basically, back then I was becoming a human version of AI with respect to ALS. And so I'm reading all these things, I'm grouping some together. I'm saying, wow, that one's interesting. That one's weird. And then I brushed across one that said men get ALS 4 times the rate of women at younger ages, but at age 60, the ratio switches to 1-to-1. And I said, oh, I'll put that in the interesting pile. And then I kept looking through other stuff. And then I finally came across that thing again, the ratio change. I go, wait a minute, that's really important. And then I started thinking, well, what happens to women at age 60?
Menopause.
Oh, menopause, and their progesterone crashes.
That's right.
More than the estrogen. A lot of women go down to 0 progesterone. Then I said, that's it. I got it. I was 7,000 abstracts in, and I'd been doing it about 2 weeks. So I told her, I've got a cure for you, and it only took me 2 weeks. And I thought I had a cure. And so I told this lady, yeah, so get some progesterone and start taking progesterone. But she never did. A lot of ALS patients, they're always desperate and they're scrambling around to try everything. She's doing stem cells, magnetic quartz healing, you name it. So she died. So didn't get a chance to see if anything happened. And then about a year after that book came out, that was called The ALS Puzzle Solved ? You might have a copy of that picture of that cover.
Yes,
it's still for sale.
Pop it up here. I haven't read that one. You kind of surprised me.
Oh, it's for sale as an ebook only. I thought it was a pretty limited market. And back then I didn't really know how to do print books, but I probably could turn it. But it's basically just a book of the emails between me and the patient, Denise, and how I was researching, what my new thoughts were. So it's really kind of a pseudo book. But it was a real mess. And then a guy named Ward Dean, have you heard of him?
I sure have.
He's the smart drug aging doctor. He came across that book and emailed me, and he has some sort of fetish for editing. So he's like, dude, I'm going to edit this book for you. So he redid the thing. So now the book has been cleaned up by Dr. Ward Dean. So I put a thank you in the front of that book for him.
Oh, fabulous.
But the bottom line was, I said, oh yeah, progesterone will cure ALS. And I thought I'd solved it, and I moved on to other types of research. And then about a year later, a study came out from some Korean researchers who had been injecting, I think they read my book because they mentioned that same 4-to-1 ratio. I'd never seen anyone dwell on that before.
What's the 4-to-1 ratio, please?
Men get ALS at 4-to-1.
Yes,
compared to women at younger ages. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
okay.
They mentioned that menopause switch of the ratio in their paper, and they said, well, we injected male mice that had lab form of ALS with 2 milligrams, 4 milligrams, and 8 milligrams per kilogram of body weight with progesterone. So they injected it into their stomach or something.
Mm-hmm.
And they said it only worked for the 4 milligrams per kilogram. It didn't work for 2 or 8. Something, that doesn't make it easy. You got to find the exact right dose of progesterone. But then I left it at that. I didn't really have any. I think after my book came out, I heard from some more ALS patients here and there. They'd see my book, the first book. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them were taking like, oh yeah, my doctor's giving me progesterone. And I like, how much? And it's, oh yeah, like 2 pills a day. And I'm telling them, well, you got to have the exact right dose. And I never could get anyone to try titrate it down to find the right dose. So I just, I'd get emails every once in a while. So then from ALS patients coming and going, finally I get one from a guy named Aiden Arpa. He was a really smart kid from MIT that he like invented AI stuff that's in Siri, and he emailed. He's real smart. Said, "Yeah, I've got ALS." Oh, and there's a picture of him in my book. He's real muscular and looks like he works out all the time. And a picture of him in the book. He says, "I got ALS. I'm trying everything. What do you think about this? I read your book. I want to try high dose D3 to see if it'll help." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, that's a 50-50 thing. But you might want to try it. It's either going to help you or it's going to hurt you. So it's a coin flip." So, well, I shouldn't laugh. Yeah, but he's a brave guy.
Yeah.
He's a brave guy. So he said, "I'm going to do it." So he started taking, I don't know how high it was, but he took high dose D3 for a couple of days. And he finally emails me. He goes, "I don't know about this. Since I've been taking it, my gesticulations have increased by 500%.
Oh my goodness.
That's like that's twitching.
Twitching. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And he says it's like several times every second. And it used to only be in my left leg, and now it's spread to my right leg. And he was upset. Like if I can't walk anymore, it's really going to be a damaging blow to my psyche. So I'm going to stop. Well, he stopped and he kind of got better, but that was a fantastic clue, but I didn't have all the puzzle pieces at that point. So I didn't really know how to help him. And unfortunately, he passed away about 4.5 years after that. But he lived a lot longer than most ALS patients. They usually die 2 to 4 years after diagnosis. Mm-hmm. They usually can't breathe anymore. And that's because their nerves just don't allow them to breathe. All their nerves just stop working. So I had those 2 big puzzle pieces. The D3 cures the blindness or repairs nerves. And then high dose D3 to ALS patient is bad, at least in the initial stages.
Yeah, very bad.
And so, yeah, well, but because of my research in D3, I knew that D3 has 5 cofactors: magnesium, vitamin K2, boron, zinc, and vitamin A, and it eats up all those cofactors. And the one that gets eaten up the first when you take high dose D3 is magnesium. So if you have bad outcome from a high dose D3 right away, it almost always means you're magnesium deficient. And so people email me, I say, "Stop taking so much D3. You need to load up on your magnesium," and it takes a long time to fix a magnesium deficiency.
This is a real problem because we don't have, other than clinical signs and symptoms, which mimic a lot of other things, we don't have a good testing modality to evaluate a person's status. I think we see this with hormones in general. Things compartmentalize in your body. And they probably need to come up with some kind of MRI that looks at magnesium levels in different tissues, because I think every tissue can have a different level of magnesium deficiency, which I'll explain to you later. Yeah.
And so basically the magnesium deficiency, it can be in your nerves, in your heart, in your muscles, bones, and only 1% of your magnesium is in your blood.
And that's the one thing that's measured routinely. The
The
serum
only thing they
magnesium,
test, yeah,
and
it's the
it's
only thing they
useless.
test. It's useless for tissue levels. They would have to give you hundreds of different biopsies, like biopsy your nerves, your brain, your muscle, this and that. And that's the only way you can get a good picture of the magnesium deficiency and where it's at in your body. That's what I'm coming to figure out from all the data. And so, and then when you're magnesium deficient, and then you start to replenish your magnesium, there's like a hierarchy. It doesn't just go to your every part of your body. First, it's going to fill up the critical tissues first, like your heart. Oh, and then the magnesium in your blood is tightly controlled. It's that 1% of magnesium from your
Yes.
body in your blood. It's completely tightly controlled. If you get just a tiny drop, you'll start getting dizzy and fall down. If it goes up too much, you black out and your heart rate goes way down. So it's tightly controlled, and it uses your body as a reservoir to take magnesium when it needs it, or a dump when it's got excess magnesium. But it can only give your body so much at one time, and most of it passes out in your urine and your feces. And it turns out that's why magnesium is a great laxative. Most laxatives are made out of magnesium.
Yeah.
So the problem is you can take a lot of magnesium, but you're only going to absorb a little bit to the point where you get diarrhea, and then that's it. You can't absorb any more. So when you're trying to replenish the magnesium in your body and bones, nerves, it's basically, I say it's like trying to blow up a big hot air balloon through a tiny soda straw. And just like one puff a day. One puff a day is not going to do it. You need a continuous puff like all day long. So you need the magnesium in your blood all day long, even in the night if you can. So to help people, I always advise people if they want to reverse their magnesium deficiency, it's going to take a long time. You got to have the magnesium in your blood all day long, and you need to take as much as you can until you get diarrhea, and stay at that level for a week. Don't go higher. That just means you're getting almost too high. Stay at that week. If the diarrhea doesn't go away, you start slowly lowering the dose of magnesium until you just have loose stools. And when that occurs, that's the right dose you need to stay at for the next year and a half of loose stools. Doesn't that sound fun?
Yeah. So how did you come to the realization that it takes that length of time, a year to a year and a half, to reach a point where you've restored magnesium? What's the endpoint you're looking for?
I asked AI. No, it actually started. Well, actually, AI confirmed it.
AI.
And then, but I first read about that in Carolyn Dean's book, The Magnesium Miracle. She's the one who really started to touch on that. And then I started digging into it, and, I haven't done the PubMed researching. I've just basically been asking AI, but AI does say it does take months, maybe up to a year, at least 6 months. I mean, for severe deficiencies, maybe a year and a half. And the AI came up with, it says there's no real studies on hierarchy, not very good ones, of replenishment, like which tissues get it first. But it did come up with the claim, it could be a hallucination, but I believe it. AI is claiming that the nerves are the last to get replenished because they turn over so slowly. It takes like a year and a half for your nerves to regenerate themselves. And I guess that's how long it takes the magnesium to get into your nerves. So they're the last ones to get fixed.
Okay.
So then we've got to get to the next clue. So we got D3 depletes magnesium, causes twitching in ALS. We've got progesterone can repair nerves with the guy's eye.
Yeah, in the mouse study you came across.
And then the progesterone in the mouse study can extend the mice lives by up to they can live like a human equivalent of like 20-25 years instead of dying in 2 to 4 years. So progesterone halts the progression of ALS if you get the right dose. And so then I still didn't have all the puzzle pieces. I mean, I should have, but it just didn't click. Then I get emails from people all the time saying, "Oh, I'm taking high dose D3 and I'm getting this symptom, like my throat's tight, I'm twitching. I've got cramps. I can't sleep. I'm constipated.
I got the cramping after using vitamin D3 from inspired by your first book. Then I got cramping all over.
Oh yeah, it ate up your magnesium.
Yeah.
But so I tell these people, well, you've got just the classic signs of magnesium deficiency. There's a big long list of possible symptoms. It's a real long list, but it's all nerve related. Any problems with your nerves is usually magnesium deficiency. And then, so I just kind of like quickly answer those emails, don't really think much about it. So I get another email from this guy from Germany. He goes, yeah, I got to tell you my symptoms. I got a tight throat. I got muscle cramps. I'm dizzy. I can't walk well. I'm twitching. And I didn't finish the rest of the email. I just started writing him back. I said, oh, you've got all the classic signs of magnesium deficiency. You just need to load up on magnesium and cut back on the D3. And he emailed me back. He goes, no, I've got ALS. And I said, oh, now I get it.
There's a thunderbolt.
That was the final clue.
Yep.
ALS is just severe magnesium deficiency in your nerves. And basically that means you can correct it with high dose magnesium over a long period, and take progesterone, which progesterone will protect the nerve. Loading the magnesium up will stop the nerve from damage occurring or continuing. And then with the vitamin D3, since it repaired that guy's eye nerve, I said, well, then you can take D3 to repair those nerves, and you should basically be able to get a cure for ALS in 2 months. Except the problem is you can't give them the D3 in the beginning when their magnesium is low, because you start twitching and have all that problems. And in fact, there's a study that says D3 deficiency is good for ALS patients in the initial stages, but it's bad in the final stages.
Oh, interesting.
So D3 is a two-edged sword. So when it goes in to repair your nerves, that's one function. In fact, there's two vitamin D systems that only one researcher in the world knows this. It's Bruce Hollis, and all these other D3 researchers that give you weekly D3 or monthly. They don't know about the two systems. They're only dealing with the bone and calcium system.
Right,
that's
usually.
That's the endocrine system. And it turns out there's two systems you have to work with. So you're playing with like something that can be good for you or something that can be really bad for you, depending on how you do it. So if you give them too much D3 in the initial stages of ALS, it's going to activate that second bone and calcium metabolism system. The D3 in that system, when you take it, it has a 3-week half-life because it binds to a protein, so it remains inert in your blood. And that's what the doctors test when they're testing your D3, is that bound protein or bound to D3.
Okay.
And then your body will use that and take it when the bone wants to fix something or when it's time to manage your calcium. It slowly takes that out. So it takes 3 weeks for that D3, since it's bound to a protein, to come down by half. It takes 6 weeks to be 25%, and then 9 weeks to get down to 12% of what you took. So that's one system, and I think that's the system that eats up your magnesium. Then there's another short-term system. It's called the autocrine-paracrine system, where you need D3 to take it every day, small amounts, and it doesn't have to go through your kidney or liver to be activated, doesn't bind to the protein, and just your tissues will convert it to the good vitamin D that you need within, like in a 12 to 24 hour period. And that system is what's in charge of your immune system and your tissue remodeling system.
This is kind of interesting, because I've checked into this with progesterone as well. And I've asked AI, like, what about progesterone and what other functions does it have where it's not really using a receptor? And it's got a whole bunch of pathways where it has some pretty direct effects. And it's sounding like this is what you're saying about vitamin D3, which wouldn't be surprising since they're so
Yeah,
similar.
no D3 researchers know about that. So they're testing all this once a week dosing to see if it affects the immune system, and they're getting negative results. It turns out you have to take smaller amounts of D3 every day to feed that first system that controls your immune system and your tissue remodeling system. So the way you can treat ALS with D3, well, we can talk about patient zero. His name is Morad. He lives in Algeria. He read my first book and contacted me. He says, "Oh my God, I got ALS. I'm trying this and that." He's trying all these different things. And I said, and this was after I'd gotten that clue from the German guy. And I told the German guy, I said, "I've got it. You've got magnesium." And I guess he thought, "Oh, if I'm just discovering that now, I don't know what I'm talking about."
Yes.
So he didn't go with me. He got worse. But I sent him the book, and I don't know if he's doing the protocol or not. But he said he was going to, but he'd gotten much worse in the 4 months. And then I hear from Morad, and I said, "You probably don't want to mess with Rilotac or the stem cell transplants. They're painful, and they give you like an extra few weeks or something, or a little bit of mobility, and there's side effects." And I said, "I'll tell you what, I've got a protocol, and I'm pretty sure it's going to work. I would be surprised if it doesn't." And he goes, "Oh, you sound pretty confident." He says, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." And he was also trying bee venom at that time. They try everything.
Yep.
And so I said, "What you got to do is, we don't know what the right dose is for progesterone, so we're just going to have to start low and then keep going up until we find it." And based on an AI query from that rat study, I had AI tell me, "What do you think the right dose is for a human that weighs 140 pounds? And it said, based on all its calculations, 20 milligrams a week.
Yep.
So I said, I was going to tell
sound
him,
like very much.
No. So I was going to tell him, well, you can start at 20 milligrams a week, but he's taking it orally, and they were injected. So there's a whole, who knows how much is absorbed orally versus injection. I didn't account for that. And so I said, you know what? Instead of taking it once a week, why don't you take it every day? Let's break that 20. Why don't you start off at 1 milligram a day and see if you get any effect? If not, we'll do 2, then 3, then 4. And then he wasn't getting any effect. And he could only get 200 milligram pills of progesterone from France. I said, well, that's tough to calibrate it. So why don't you get olive oil, mix 100 milliliters of olive oil, warm olive oil, with the progesterone pill, and then shake it up. And so it's diffuse. And then you take, for every milligram, you just take 1 milliliter of the olive oil. So he needed to get a calibrate, you got to get some science lab equipment, which is cheap, just a calibrated eyedropper or whatever.
So is he using it sublingually then?
Yeah. So he's just, so he just squirts a little olive oil in his mouth.
Okay.
And then he's taking his proper dose. So he was doing that, and then he wasn't getting any effects. So I said, just go to 3 milligrams. Let's just see where you get anything. Tries 3, that didn't work. And then all of a sudden he's taking 5. He goes, hey, I noticed after I take 5 milligrams, I can move my arm a little higher than before. I said, oh, well, that sounds pretty good. He goes, well, but it only lasts for about 5 hours. And then it stops.
Yep.
And then he took 8 milligrams and he fell down or something. And I said, well, that sounds like it's too much. So he went back to 5 milligrams. Then he decided, I'm going to take 5 milligrams every 5 hours because it only lasts for 5 hours.
That's a good idea, actually.
And then I asked why that would be. And it said, oh, that progesterone has an anti-spasticity effect. And because it converts to allopregnenolone, and that has a half-life of 5 hours or something like that. So apparently it's converting it, so maybe it wasn't repairing his nerves, but it was reducing his spasticity or muscle rigidity or something.
Yeah, could be.
But so he's doing that and loading up on the magnesium quite a bit. And we're doing that for about 2 months, and he kind of stabilized. He didn't get any worse, and he could move his arms a little bit better. And so that was at the point where I thought it was safe for him to start some D3. So he started taking 1,000 units a day. And then, so he'd done 2 months of progesterone and magnesium loading. Then he took
what kind of magnesium did you use for him, by the way?
I don't know. He just bought magnesium pills. I don't know.
Oh,
got
you know,
from out. I don't know. Just magnesium's. It's all the same. Just they say some absorb better, some don't.
Yes, exactly.
And but the real trick is it's not the absorption rate. It's like how long it stays in your blood is the more important thing than how fast it absorbs, because you need it in your blood all day long. So from that perspective, the one they say is the worst, magnesium oxide, might be the best because it absorbs slowly. And then because you can only absorb so much. All right, so he's on this. So in month 3, he's taken 1,000 units of D3 a day. And then he sends me an email after about a month. He goes, "You're not going to believe it. I had a little miracle today." I said, "Oh, what was that?" And he goes, "Well, I normally get really stressed out when there's people fighting around me and they were having an argument, and it didn't bother me at all." And anxiety is another symptom of magnesium deficiency. So apparently we calmed his anxiety with the magnesium. And then he said about 8 hours after that argument, I could move my fingers again a little bit and my wrist and my left hand where the ALS started. And I looked that up on AI. I said, "Well, how common is something like that?" And they said, "Well, it happens in less than 99.9% of ALS cases, and most practitioners never see it during their lifetimes."
Wow. That brings up a point that you also cover in your book. ALS starts in a spot and then seems to spread to other areas. That also speaks to this compartmentalization of the
well, that's not the end of the end of the Morad story.
Oh, okay. Keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that at the end, or after we're done with Morad.
Okay.
Okay, so he's getting all these fantastic improvements. He's wiggling his fingers. And then he sent me videos like he's moving his wrist back and forth. And then he says, "Wow." And then a week later, he's like, I can move my leg again, my left leg. Like his left leg was completely paralyzed, and so was his wrist and his fingers. And he's like, now I can move my left leg again. And not a lot, but just like flap it, like back and forth like you're fidgeting. And he said that was impossible. Okay. Wow. I said, "Oh, wow, we're on the road to success."
Yeah.
So I said, "Well, why don't you boost it to 2,000 a day and see what happens?" So he started boosting it to 2,000, and that seemed okay. Nothing really happened for a week. And I guess I was a little greedy. And I said, "Well, why don't you try 5,000? And so he did 5,000 for 3 days, and I got an email back. He goes, "Oh, I had a terrible experience, Jeff. I collapsed in the hallway, and now I can't walk." So I'm like, "Oh, no." And it turns out, and then I said, "Well, I would stop the 5,000, and you should get better." And then he's like, the next day, "No, it's getting worse." And then the third day he emails me. He goes, "Oh my God, I feel like such an idiot and a failure." I said, "Why?" He goes, "I switched brands of magnesium about 2 weeks ago because I got this stuff for half price." And I was looking on and then he said, I've been really constipated. And I said, and that's a magnesium deficiency symptom. And he didn't really tell me about that. And then he looked on the internet, and he said, it turns out out of how he could have picked this brand out of all the brands out there, almost nobody would counterfeit magnesium pills. He bought half price magnesium pills that had no magnesium in them.
You're kidding.
So while he's boosting his D3 dose, he's cut off his magnesium. So he had a collapse, and then he started losing the gains in his fingers and his wrist and his leg. I told him, "Don't worry. Now we know what works and what doesn't, and we can just start over." So now he cut out the D3 for a while, and then I told him it's going to take 90 days for that 5,000 of IU as a D3 to get out of your system. In the meantime, your bones are going to be grabbing the magnesium out of your nerves.
Yep.
So So I told him, so just try to ride this out. Our goal now is just to get you stabilized and just go back on the progesterone and the magnesium and start magnesium IVs. He's been having a nurse come in and giving him an IV that if you take an IV of magnesium, AI claims it'll boost the replenishment process by about 5 times. If you get a couple of IVs a week, but it's dangerous if you do it on your own because you could die if you pass out and you don't unplug the magnesium. Your heart will stop.
Yeah.
So you need to have a doctor with you to tap your knees and check your nerve reflexes. And once that starts to get slow, it's time to stop the IV. But he's been doing that. He's back on high dose real magnesium. I said, that should be a lesson to you. Don't buy the cheapest supplements. and then he seems to have been stabilized now. And I told him, you probably aren't going to start getting better till maybe a month from now. So he's got about 30 days until he's going to start getting better again, based on how long it takes for the D3 to come down in the bone metabolism D3 system. And then I started thinking, the smaller amounts of D3 are needed for that 24-hour system.
Yeah.
So I was thinking maybe you should be taking a little D3, but I could flip a coin on that, but he wasn't progressing. And then, so I asked AI. After a week or so, I started thinking it over. I asked AI, and AI said, yeah, maybe you might want to take 500 IUs a day for the nerve repair function. Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't impact that calcium metabolism system very much. And then I actually emailed Bruce Hollis, the #1 D3 researcher in the world. He's the only one that knows about the 2 systems. And he says, I don't know what to tell you. Because I asked him, is there any crosstalk between the 2 systems? Could the 24-hour system get like some, would the 3-week system loan some D3 to the 24-hour system? He goes, I don't think so, but I don't know. And so then I asked AI, I got the answer, and I ran AI's answer against Bruce Hollis, and he said, yeah, sounds good to me. So now he's back on 500. He's now back on 500 IUs of D3 a day, just hoping he'll get some nerve repair while the higher D3 levels are coming down. So this is a very complicated dance, I would say.
Really? Can I interject something?
Yeah, that's the end of the Morad story. So now let's move on.
If you look in the literature, you can find that pregnenolone and progesterone are both made by the Schwann cells, and they keep the myelin sheath repaired. And you can't measure this.
Yeah. Pregnenolone is the first hormone your body makes from cholesterol. And then the second one is your body makes progesterone from pregnenolone. Oh, and the other thing I have him taking is melatonin, because I know that boosts progesterone in my case. I had my blood tested. And if you take high dose melatonin, it really shoots your progesterone up.
And what dose?
And then,
for
God, I was taking, for melatonin, I was taking like 200 milligrams or 400 milligrams at night.
Okay.
And
Russ Ryder, who has researched melatonin too, University of Texas, San Antonio, for a time there, he was taking melatonin by the teaspoonful. He said it's one of the safest things you can use.
Well, yeah, and I asked AI, it does have neuroprotective properties other than just boosting your progesterone. But I found after taking high dose melatonin for a while, I got my progesterone levels tested, and my progesterone levels were 2 times higher than the upper limit for men. Mm-hmm. So I was almost becoming a woman.
No. Progesterone's like sexually neutral. When you get the highest levels of progesterone in the human female body, you can have a male or a female fetus, and it doesn't push you either way. So it's sex neutral. It's and it's an adrenal gland hormone, and then intracellularly, it's produced all over the body too, and we can't measure it. So I see a lot of
Yeah.
parallel here from what you've learned about vitamin D.
Yeah. So and then I do remember some emails with some guy I thought was crazy who only had half a brain he got hit by a van or something, lost half his brain.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was crazy, but that Dr. Michael Fossil, I'd been emailing him when I was just beginning, and I guess he was kind of irritated with me and
Mm-hmm.
said, "Oh, I want you to talk to this guy." And this guy was just peppered me with emails. But the one thing he kept telling me was that progesterone is the most neuroprotective substance known to man, and it's why women get better from brain injuries than men do.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's the
yep.
one thing I learned from him, and that's another clue that I had in my quiver that helped me crack this ALS puzzle.
Yeah, they inject progesterone for traumatic brain injury and increase the recovery acutely by a great percentage when they started doing that.
Yeah, they should give that to men.
Yep, they should, either sex.
And yeah, so then I figured with that Guam, the Guamanians on that island were eating the bat soup that had a neurotoxin in it. That back in the 50s, there was like a huge cluster of ALS, Parkinson's, and dementia in this like small tribe of the Chamorro Indians, and they originally thought it was from this bat soup that they would eat because the bats would eat these fruits called cycads or something, or from the cycad tree. I don't know. Had some kind of neurotoxin in it. They call it BCAA. I don't know much about it. And then they thought that was what caused it, but then they fed it to large amounts to rats. It didn't cause any neurotoxicity. And then that Japanese prisoner who was hiding for 28 years that didn't know World War II was over, he was eating cycads like his whole life, and he didn't get any neurotoxicity, so that kind of squenched that idea. And then some other researchers noticed that, well, there's magnesium and calcium deficient water and soil in that area. So they thought, well, maybe it's the magnesium and the calcium deficiency that's causing ALS. But they looked into it and they found that the magnesium levels in all these Indians were normal, but some of them had low calcium. And so they thought maybe it was just low calcium. Oh, they also had high aluminum in the soils. And that's one of the metals that are supposedly associated with ALS. And it turns out they didn't test and then the disease stopped in 1970 when that bat species, they ate it to extinction, and then the disease went away. So even though it didn't hurt you, it somehow was still causing ALS, and they couldn't figure it out. And so it turns out, the way I figured it out, that they tested the Indians' serum magnesium levels, which tells you nothing because that's tightly controlled. It will not tell you if your various tissues are deficient. And so thus they missed the magnesium deficiency and didn't talk about it at all in the study. And then they did notice that about a third of them had low calcium levels. So they were blaming it on low calcium. But it turns out low calcium is associated with magnesium deficiency. And had they been able to test their tissues, they would have found the true cause of all this was the magnesium deficiency in the soil and water. And the reason cycad neurotoxins didn't affect the rats or that Japanese soldier is probably because they were magnesium deficient in their nerves. And magnesium protects your nerves from neurotoxins. So they had to get a rat that was magnesium deficient. Then if they'd given them that neurotoxin, it probably would have given the rat ALS. But what's interesting is some people got ALS, which affects the motor neurons. Some people got Parkinson's disease, which affects one part of the brain that makes dopamine. Yep. And from neurons. And then another group got dementia, and that's just the general area of the brain, in addition to that dopamine producing area. And so I figured that it depends what disease you get is where you have your magnesium deficiency the most. So it's basically all those three would be the same disease, just affecting different neurons, different kinds of neurons, depending on which one. which ones are deficient. Then I looked up Alzheimer's brains, and guess what? All Alzheimer's brains are found to be magnesium deficient.
Wow. Wow.
So, so all dementia could possibly just be triggered by magnesium deficiency. The way I think it works, I had AI come up with an easy to understand blog post for these ALS groups. I'm trying to get them to, they're hard to convince, those people. They've been scammed so many times. So I'm trying to get something easy for them to understand. And AI came up with this idea, said, well, think of your neurons as a forest. And when they're magnesium deficient, they're all dry and brittle like a tinderbox. And all it takes is one spark and one nerve to set off a forest fire. Yeah. That spark can come from many different places. It could come from an injury. It can come from overuse and exercise. Like athletes get ALS a lot because they're doing a lot of repetitive motion, and it takes a lot of magnesium.
They're gonna. All the sweating they do is going to deplete it.
You lose magnesium in the sweat. There's a lot of magnesium you need magnesium to make ATP. In fact, one step of the ATP, they should call it magnesium ATP, because you always have to have magnesium there to make ATP. And and
magnesium is a cofactor for progesterone, by the way. The coenzyme is B6, but magnesium is a cofactor. So any further metabolism of progesterone is really dependent on magnesium.
Oh, and it also turns out that magnesium deficiency is related to type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. And I looked into it. It turns out when you're magnesium deficient, if it appears in the beta cells in your pancreas that make insulin, that's when you get type 2 diabetes, when you're magnesium deficient. And then before you get type 2 diabetes, you get insulin resistance. That's when you're magnesium deficient, and it affects all your insulin receptors, which need magnesium to work. So usually insulin resistance precedes type 2 diabetes, but that kind of explains why people with Parkinson's and type 2 diabetes, it all goes together. They usually find it in clumps. And then turns out all the symptoms that people get before they get Parkinson's disease are the same as magnesium deficiency symptoms. So both ALS patients and Parkinson's patients get the same magnesium deficiency symptoms, like constipation, muscle twitching, cramps, fatigue. They get all that before the disease kicks in. So
wow,
that's kind of interesting. Oh, and then is this getting too long? We could just go through this, how it spreads.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it turns out.
Tell me more.
Yeah, so magnesium deficiency, if you get a crisis in one nerve, it finally just gives up and dies, and it gives off free radicals, reactive oxygen species is another name for that. It makes misfolded proteins, which they find in ALS nerves. And it turns out magnesium is required for proper protein folding. And
that was on the tip of my tongue to bring up. That's prion disease is associated with that
like mad cow
folding.
Disease. Oh, that could be caused by magnesium deficiency too.
Yeah, this is really cool because they don't really know, but I think that I heard this lecture with a farmer, and he was forced to kill his herd of cattle because of mad cow disease in the area. But he had healthy cows, very healthy cows, and grass-fed, organic, everything. And they had something was short in the soil, and it might, from his talk, I don't remember exactly. It was like, I think I remember maybe
it's magnesium deficiency, but I think prion is just a misfolding disease. It's not even like a virus or anything.
Right.
And once it's misfolded, it teaches other proteins to misfold. The whole thing could be started by magnesium deficiency.
So back to your neural damage in one place, and then it kind of flares. Maybe this is
and then the misfolded proteins might go into other nerves, the nearby nerves, and tell those proteins to misfold. And if the nearby nerves are magnesium deficient, you get the reactive oxygen, the free radicals, and then signals from apoptosis, sort of self-destruct the nerves. And then that spreads to that nerve, and then it catches fire, and it spreads to all the nerves eventually. And then it goes from one to another.
Yeah.
Oh, and then, so now we know about that. And there's one last cool thing. I told you this wouldn't go a half hour.
Yeah.
And then there's a study, everyone talks, there's like pesticides that can set off the forest fire. There's a big Parkinson's belt, they call it, in the Midwest, where a lot of people do farming or they work in factories. So it's pesticides or heavy metals have been implicated. And so anything can touch it off. And it turns out that they tested for heavy metals in the cerebrospinal fluid of ALS patients, and they found a high incidence of 9 different possible metals, like not magnesium, but the other manganese, cobalt, uranium, which causes Gulf War syndrome, aluminum. You can get that from your cooking utensils.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out the metals themselves.
A lot of vaccines have aluminum in it.
Yeah, but it's not really the metals that are the problem. They found out it's the ratio of the metal to the amount of magnesium in each case.
Wow.
So if you had a high magnesium, your ratio would be low. And it turns out, I asked AI, I said, oh, well, that's simple. It turns out these metals can compete with magnesium to get into your nerves.
Yep.
So if there's a lot of metals there, they're going into your nerves, causing more magnesium deficiency in the nerve, causing the magnesium crisis. And then, so there's a million ways to get ALS, but the underlying cause seems to be a forest fire or a tinderbox of magnesium deficient nerves.
Could I bring up another case? This was my business partner, and she was diagnosed with high cholesterol levels. And she was a pharmacist. She had very long-lived relatives also with high cholesterol, but she determined that she would use statins. And she probably used statin drugs for at least 20 years. And
did you read that part in my book?
No, I didn't. I just looked this up before we started talking because I was thinking about her. Because not until she died at 68 with a lot of wasting and a lot of neurological problems was she diagnosed on autopsy that it was ALS. About a year later, I got in my feed, I got an article that linked the statin drugs with ALS, particularly the longer lasting ones with ALS. So
I can fill that in. There's a whole section in my book on that. But who was the partner?
What was the partner? I don't understand.
Yeah, who was your partner? It wasn't the one you do the radio show with.
No, I had another business. She was my partner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not the person.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh, good. You got me nervous. I thought I didn't hear the news. All right. Yeah, I looked into it, and it turns out there's all these studies that say, oh, statins cause ALS. There's no problem with them. All funded by big pharma, right? Mm-hmm. But then, so I had seen it somewhere before that there's a federal adverse event reporting system.
Right.
That's not funded by anybody. And just patients taking particular drugs, they write in if they had any adverse events.
Right.
And AI didn't give it to me at first. I said, I know it's in there. Get back in there. I'll find it and show it to you. I had to yell at AI. And AI says, yes, I'm sorry. You're right. There's a report that from the federal FAERS, Federal Adverse Event Reporting System, that statins can increase the risk of ALS from 9 times to 107 times.
Wow.
And the worst kind are the lipophilic statins that dissolve into your fat. Like I forgot the name, but it's all in I got they're in the book. There's it starts at 9 times, 30 times, 50 times, 100 times. So of course this is a thread I have to unravel.
And all your nerve cells are fatty. Your nerve cells. So it makes sense that the statins would actually concentrate, the fat soluble ones might concentrate.
Well, it also cuts down on your cholesterol, and your body needs cholesterol to repair your nerves.
Yep.
And then, so I started asking, well, do statins affect progesterone?
Mhm.
And at first it said, well, there's studies that say no, when pregnant women can take them, blah, blah, blah. But your intuition does seem correct, because there's one animal study where they gave statins to rats, and at the highest dose, it reduced their progesterone 41.8%. But all the human studies didn't show that effect. So the statins inhibit cholesterol. Progesterone is made from cholesterol.
Right,
So it
right.
just simply makes sense that you're going to have less progesterone if you're taking statins. And then it also turns out that statins and
I was just going to say, that's what I looked up, statins and magnesium. Go ahead.
oh yeah, so statins and magnesium, they work on the same pathway with respect to cholesterol. And some doctors say you could just take magnesium instead of statins.
Mhm.
And so statins will reduce your progesterone and interfere with your magnesium metabolism. And, and then they also somehow get into your nerves with like these miniature knives and chop them up. No, that part, I don't know. So in my book, I just said, don't take statins. They could give you ALS. And there was one study, like, how much longer do you live if you take statins? And it turns out they found out that if you take statins and you've never had a heart attack before, you will live possibly 4 days longer. Or no, 3 days longer. 3 days longer. And if you'd had a heart attack and you took statins, you might live 4 days longer. So statins is just a big, bad gamble. I would never touch a statin.
Yeah, never. So there was a life insurance company that did a study. They sold life insurance, right? So they wanted to know what the correlation between cholesterol levels and longevity.
What was it, 0?
No, cholesterol level, total cholesterol of 270 was the best longevity. So what the heck are we doing?
Like,
yeah.
The more the better? The more the better. Oh, yeah.
The more the better.
That wouldn't surprise me. I think modern medicine's the biggest scam in modern history, but that's a whole nother story.
Okay.
So I think we beat this horse to death.
I think so. This has been absolutely wonderful, Jeff. It's always a delight to speak with you, and a lot of nuggets and a lot of things to think about here.
Try to get people to buy my book, because once they read it, they'll realize magnesium is going to protect you from a lot of things. I mean, it can probably, some people say tinnitus is incurable. I have a feeling high dose magnesium will cure tinnitus if you do a long-term dosing regimen. It'll cure possibly any nerve disease, any motor neuron disease. So it's not just a book for ALS patients, it's for everybody. So everyone should buy this book.
So I'll be putting links to where to get your book. This has been absolutely wonderful. And I don't think the story is over yet, but this is just amazing. That we need more people like you to do the puzzle pieces, to put things together. And we've so funneled our experts in medicine that they don't know anything about how the body works with all its parts. So it's
they're in it for the money. They're all in it for the money. I don't get paid except for if you buy my book. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Well, that's okay. All right. Thank you again, Jeff. Bye.
Thanks.